Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Migratory Monk channel. Europeans tend to regard Greece and Rome as the source of their culture, but it is seldom realized that Greco-Roman culture itself was entirely Vedic. Mrs. Colonel Elwood observes, quote, "The striking analogy between some of the Hindu fables with those of the Greeks would induce us to believe that the Greek and the Hindus must, at an early age, have had much intercourse, and possibly Pythagoras, with the doctrine of the metempsychosis, may have imported some of the adventures of the Indian gods and ascribed them to the Greek deities. Indra, whirling his thunderbolt, appears to be the same with Jupiter. Krishna and his 9 gopis are evidently Apollo and the Muses. The beautiful Kamadeva is a more interesting being even than the Grecian Cupid, whilst the lovely Maya, the goddess of beauty, the Venus, sprang from the bosom of the ocean. Surya and Arjuna resemble Phoebus and Aurora, and the twin sons Ashinav alias Ashini Kumarov resemble Castor and Pollux. Lakshmi, crowned with ears of corn, appears to be Ceres. Mother Kali resembles with Hecate or Proserpine. Sir William Jones identifies Ganesh with Janus, while Hanuman and his monkey attendants resemble Pan and his sylvan deities. Unquote. This is the observation of Mrs. Colonel Elwood. According to Dr. P. N. Oak, Greece under the ancient Vedic administration was used as a penal settlement. It was therefore designated in Sanskrit as the Yavan or Yavan region. In that word, the first syllable Ja signifies departure, while the other syllable Ban or Bana signifies a forest. Therefore, the term Yavana signified a land of exile or segregation. The European term Ionia is a corruption of the Sanskrit term Yavana. Social dropouts who could not conform to the strict standards of Vedic discipline either left voluntarily for Greece or were deported. Rebels who left in a huff also went to Greece. Some other left for Greece from a spirit of pure adventure. Others followed them as caterers and traders, while officials of the Vedic administration were posted there on duty. Thus, the Vedic Grecian settlement was similar to the origin of the British settlement in Australia and of the Andaman Nicobar Islands under the British regime in Bharat. In Vedic tradition also enjoins that every adult after retirement spend a part of his life in the forest. That period was known as Vanaprastha, means departing to distant forest or to Greece. Being mainly rebels, outcasts, dropouts, adventurers, and nonconformists, these elements in Greece, alias the Vedic Yavanas, gradually built up a parallel mythology out of spite for or ignorance of the mother culture they had left behind in Bharat or Europe. A parallel example may be found in Punjab and Bangladesh regions of Bharat, now mainly inhabited by Hindus, forcibly converted to Islam. Consequently, they do their utmost in a spirit of proselytized vengeance to look, dress, and behave differently. Yet, in spite of their best antagonistic striving, their Hindu origin still shows through their names and customs. For instance, several Muslims still call themselves Kanwar, Raja, Rao, or Bhatti, etc., which are all Hindu appellations. But unfortunately, this has become the reality today. Thus, whenever there is a cleavage, either due to anger or long residence away from home, difference in customs, manners, language, and deities do develop by themselves or are deliberately forced to accentuate the rift. This must be remembered when studying the history of ancient Greece, Rome, and other parts of Europe. Scholars should remember this principle of historical investigation. Greece, having been a prominent penal settlement under the post Mahabharata Vedic administration, Lord Krishna was one of the main deities of the region. Historian Barbara Wingfield Stratford observes, quote, "In many ways, Krishna worship is very like Christianity, and there is a strange similarity up to a point in the story of the early years of the Christ child and Lord Krishna. Driven from his birthplace by oppression and persecution, the earthly parents of Sri Krishna also found a Nazareth to shelter them for a time in Gokul, the little city of refuge." Unquote. So, it is not only the story of Jesus which is patterned on that of Krishna, but even the story of Moses, the Messiah of the Jews' birth, is identical with that of Lord Krishna. This indicates how the so-called Jews and Christians coined their own stories of their own separate divine heroes. But funnily, in so doing, they had no alternative but to stick both to the original name of the hero as well as the incidents of his life, because it may be noticed that the term Jesus Christ is only a malpronunciation of the Sanskrit name Jesus Krishna. Likewise, S and H are interchangeable as Sindhi becomes Hindi. The Sanskrit term Mahesh means the great Lord is being spelled by the Jews as Moses. Now we will discuss about the language of ancient Greece, which is like that of the rest of the Vedic world, was Sanskrit. Later, after the great carnage of the Mahabharata war, when the meticulous universal Sanskrit educational system broke down, the local mannerisms led to twists and turns of pronunciation hardening into what we term as Greek language. The same rule holds good for all other languages. They are all post-Mahabharata variations of a universal Sanskrit. The same rule also applies to all deities. Mythology and personal names too are latter-day regional variations of earlier universal Vedic traditions. Now we will discuss how the Hindu Sanskrit names are being distorted. For example, Demetrius means Devamitras, a friend of the gods. Socrates is Sukrutas, one whose conduct is helpful and meritorious. Alexander is Alexandra, means the invisible divinity. Aristotle is Aristotle, means the waterer of calamities. Parthia means the land of Partha or June. Theodorus or Deodorus, the Devadwaras, meaning the doorway of divinity. Another important factor is that Lord Krishna, the mentor of Arjuna, was one of the chief deities worshipped in Greece. That is why when Greece was terrorized into accepting Christianity, Greeks and Romans quietly baptized Jesus Krishna as Jesus Christ. The Greek greeting Hari Tute means may Hari bless you. refers to Lord Krishna as Hari. It is the equivalent of the Bharatiya Hindu greeting Ram Ram. The name Hercules too is Harikul is, meaning Lord of the lineage of Hari, alias Vishnu, and signifies Krishna. The 12 legendary labors of Hercules, counterfeited by the Greeks, are patterned after the 12 outstanding feats of Lord Krishna, such as slaying of the demon king Kansa and lifting the Govardhan mountain. Thus, word for word, God for God, and name for name, Greek civilization, traditions, culture, and language are Hindu Vedic origin. Likewise, all eminent Greek personalities we hear of during the pre-Christian era were all Hindus, means follower of Vedic culture, and their language was a form of Sanskrit. For example, among them was Strabo, an eminent geographer whose 3-volume geography is a source of great information on the ancient world. Strabo is surmised to have been born in 66 BC and he died in 24 AD. He belonged to the Stoic sect, that is the Sanskrit word sattvic, meaning pure, intelligent, and meditative. An earlier systematic Greek writer on geography was Eratosthenes, who died at the age of 80 around 196 BC. Eratosthenes is the Sanskrit name Ratisthan is, means Lord of the city, of the goddess of love. The initial E is superfluous. We arrive at this conclusion because the Sanskrit word ratik, meaning amorous, is spelled as erotic in European languages. The expertise of Bharatiyas in navigation during those ancient days is apparent from Strabo's noting on page 149 of the 3rd volume of his geography that a certain ship-rigged Bharatiya, when brought to the Egyptian king, he offered a proposal to guide Egyptian ships to Bharat if he was promised safe passage to Bharat. On page 257 of his 3rd volume, Strabo informs us that, quote, Alexander too erected altars as boundaries of his Indian campaign in those parts of the Indies he arrived at, in imitation of Hercules and Bacchus, unquote. Please remember, Bacchus means Lord Shiva. A footnote on the same page adds, quote, these were 12 altars of 50 cubits each erected to the 12 gods, unquote. Again, these 12 gods are Hindu Vedic 12 Adityas. It is a hoary Vedic custom to erect Shiva and Vishnu temples to mark the outer limits of districts, cities, regions, and countries. These served several purposes. Weary travelers were usually afforded food, shelter, rest, and peace at such temples. Moreover, temples at the borders ensured a steady and constant stream of devotees to offer worship, take vows, and celebrate weddings. Such a stream of people also ensured ceaseless vigil on the border without the state incurring any expenditure. The offerings of the constant multitude at the shrines also enabled the priest and other temple staffs to cater to the needy, for instance, the destitutes, and to travelers. Another important factor is that Alexander was a devout Hindu, alias a Vedist. It proved firstly by his Sanskrit name Alakshndra, meaning the invisible Lord, and secondly by his meticulous adherence to the tradition of Vedic rulers to erect temples along the borders of his realm to 12 Vedic deities. A true Vedist means a true follower of Vedic principles, sees no rivalry between Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu. The Shaivite versus Vaishnavite controversy one sometimes hears of is a latter-day development raised by narrow-minded people. To a true Vedist, divinity is one, but it has three functions, namely of creation, nurture and annihilation, representing three facets alias three functions. Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva represent two of those facets. For example, if Lord Vishnu is compared with milk, then Lord Shiva is like curd. Therefore, it was the custom for rulers and administrators, for instance the Kshatriyas, in Vedic tradition to ensure proper administration of their realm as representatives of Vishnu, and to fight relentlessly in the field of battle against the aggressor in the name of Lord Shiva. The Greek name Bacchus is the truncated Sanskrit name Trayambakes of Lord Shiva, means the three-eyed Lord. In European usage, the first syllable Trayam got dropped off, while the remainder continued to be spelled as Bacchus. And curiously enough, just as some wayward persons in Bharat smoke and consume intoxicants such as bhang in the name of Lord Shiva, the Greek too regarded Shiva as the deity presiding over drinking orgies. This again shows how the Greeks were wayward Hindus. Mount Olympus of the Greeks is supposed to be the heavenly abode of their gods. Eliminating the last syllable pos, one may notice that the first syllable olim is the Sanskrit word alayam, meaning abode, as in granthalayam, abode of books, means library, and devalayan means abode of gods, means temple. The Greek Mount Olympus is a regional substitute for the Vedic tradition, which consider the Himalayan peaks such as Mount Kailas as the abode of Lord Shiva, or Mount Meru, the abode of other demigods, including Lord Brahma. Historian Pocock surmises that Pythagoras must have borrowed his philosophy in part from the Bharatiya philosophers, for his scholars were subjected to silence for 5 years as in Bharat. The 5-year period of silence was intended to give students a good grounding in traditional education so that they may not feel the need for asking any question, or if they did feel like asking questions, these would be sensible. About Pythagoras and other European scholars of the pre-Christian era, it would be more proper to say that whatever region they belong to, they all were brought up in the Vedic system of education that pervaded the world in ancient times. So, instead of saying that Pythagoras must have borrowed his philosophy in part from Bharatiya philosophers, it would be more appropriate to say that Pythagoras himself was a product of the worldwide Vedic educational system. This should be apparent not only from the 5-year period of silence he enjoined on his pupils, but even from his very name. The term, please listen carefully, the term Pythaguru, spelled by Greeks as Pythagoras, itself signifies a guru working at a pitha or pitham, meaning an educational establishment. All scholars must hereafter change their mode of thinking in this respect. They must not talk of some vague Bharatiya influence in some sphere or country, such as in Japan, China, Arabia, or Italy, for instance. All must realize that the Vedic way of life, which now largely survives only in Bharat, pervaded the entire ancient world. Therefore, it was indigenous but Vedic. That Krishna was the god of Greece and of course Rome is proved by the silver coins struck by Agathocles a Greek ruler of the 2nd century BC. These coins on display in several museums bear the imprint of Lord Krishna and his brother Balaram. Krishnaniti, meaning the way of life advocated by Lord Krishna, was the ideal to which all people looked up to Greece and Rome in pre-Christian days. Later, that Krishnaniti Vedic cult deeply camouflaged itself as Christianity with a baptismal shroud when threatened with annihilation by Emperor Constantine's military force. The city of Corinth in Greece had been in ancient times a prominent center of Vedic culture, with several of its temples dedicated to Lord Krishna. A large mosaic of a young lad, Krishna, playing the flute, standing cross-legged under a tree while grazing cows, hangs in the museum in Corinth. It was obviously salvaged from a local Krishna temple ravaged and converted into a church by Christian invaders. About the Hindu Vedic Sanskrit culture of Greece, Edward Pocock has published a special volume devoted to the topic. It is titled India in Greece or Truth in Mythology. Edward Pocock tells us, quote, among the strongest peculiarities of the so-called heroic period of Greece appear the perfection of the arts and the abundance of gold, the profusion of gold vessels, their varied yet elegant workmanship, the beauty of embroidered shawls, the tasteful and ample produce of the loom, the numerous ornaments of ivory, the staining and working of that material, the gift of necklace as a valuable present, sometimes too from the gods, the brazen tripods and the cauldrons, the social refinement and comfort, the magnificent palaces of Alcinous and Menelaus, finally the great contest of Troy, the constant use of the war chariot, the whole of this state of society, civil and military, must strike anyone as eminently Asiatic, much of it specifically Indian. Such, it is undoubtedly these evidences were but the attendant tokens of an Indian colonization with its corresponding religion and language. The whole of Greece, from the era of the supposed godships of Poseidon and Zeus down to the Trojan War, was Indian in language, sentiment and religion, and in the arts of peace and war. Unquote. Page 9 to 12. Spoken by Edward Pocock. Again, Pocock says in page number 16 that, quote, Sanskrit was the language of Pelasgic and Hellenic Greece. Both logographers and poets from the most ancient date, not excepting Homer and Hesiod, manifest a profound ignorance or a profound contempt for the primitive state of their native land. We shall therefore be cautious for taking our guide in matters of Pelasgic or mythologic or heroic history, either from Homer or Hesiod, from logographer or poet, save when their accounts are conformable to Sanskrit sources. Unquote. Thus, a number of very renowned scholars, from the ancient Strabo to the modern Pocock, warn readers about the unreliability of Greek sources. That is what explains the European expression, Greek meets a Greek, meaning a cheat encounters a super cheat. This Greek undependability is like Muslim undependability. Scholars all over the world seem to be unaware of these cautions. Pocock accuses Greek authors of so metamorphosing original names of men, cities, and religious rites as to confuse and mislead posterity. He therefore suggests a special course in discovering the original. Arabs and Persians play the same trick. They tar their pre-Islamic history also to look Islamic in its entirety. Professor Bornoff, in his discourse on Sanskrit and its literature delivered at the College of France, observed, quote, "We will study India with its philosophy and its myths, its literature, its laws, and its language. Nay, it is more than India, it is a page of the origin of the world that we will attempt to decipher." Unquote. That quotation about Professor Bornoff is from Pocock's volume. It indicates how gifted minds, such as that of Bornoff, have from time to time realized that Vedic culture and Sanskrit language have been a human heritage from the very beginning. Pocock asserts that, quote, "the Greek language is a derivation from Sanskrit. Sanskrit-speaking people, alias the Indians, must have dwelt in Greece," unquote, page number 18. The Greek name Macedonia is the distorted Sanskrit term Mahasadonia, implying a region of great mansions. In European languages, the letter H of Sanskrit words gets eliminated. For instance, the word Saha is spelled only as CO, so, or SO, so, and also pronounced as ko in the word corporate. Similarly, the term Papaha means absolver from sin, is spelled merely as Papa or Pope. The name Maharsipal turns into Marco Polo, means one nurtured by a great sage. As everywhere else in the Vedic world, sun worship was a prominent ritual in Greece too. The term Heliopolis is the Sanskrit word Helipuras, meaning the city of the sun. The term metropolis too is the Sanskrit term Mahattara Puras, meaning a bigger or large size city. Accordingly, the term metro is Sanskrit Mahattara. French archaeologists have excavated Ai-Khanum, a Greek city in Afghanistan. In the Greek kingdom, founded around the 3rd century BC, a number of coins, trinkets, and most importantly, an intricate mosaic depicting one of the scenes in Shakuntalam reveal the age-old links between the Greeks and the Bharatiyas. This piece of news was published in Indian Express, February 1, 1992. Dr. Oliver Guillaume, who participated in the excavation of Ai-Khanum, maintained that they had reasons to believe so because of the typical Bharatiya characteristics of the pieces of art found at the excavation site. Some of the Indo-Greek coins even depict a plethora of Bharatiya deities, including Lord Krishna. The most intriguing piece of evidence, however, is a shell and stained glass motif that has been put together by the French archaeologists. Dr. Guillaume claims that the scene could probably be from the legendary Shakuntalam. Dr. Guillaume was the head of the French Center for Human Resources, New Delhi. Ai-Khanum may have been the capital of the kingdom founded by a Greek called Diodotus. That kingdom extended southwards beyond the Hindu Kush mountain into Gandhar. The Sakas later gained control over the Greek kingdom. The city, which had reached glorious heights, was finally destroyed in 145 BC. The archaeologists said the name Diodotus is Vedic Sanskrit Devadutas, meaning divine messengers. Like all Greek cities, Ai-Khanum too was divided into the lower and the upper towns. The latter was known as Acropolis. Apart from the palace, the city had a huge gymnasium, a theatre, and temples. A number of gargoyles and theatre masks found at the site resemble those used in Greece. So, my dear viewers, the title of this episode, The Vedic Past of Greece, is not something like an imaginary fairy tale, but based on solid historical evidences. Please consider all these evidences carefully and deeply like a detective. Then only the truth will be revealed. Har Har Mahadev, Hare Krishna.